Hey, everybody. Welcome into episode 159 of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. My guest on the show today is Greg Bennick. If you've never heard of Greg Bennick, here's what you need to know. Greg is a world-class speaker. He's a consultant. He's a global event host, and he's a new author, a best-selling new author. Greg and I had a really awesome conversation recently, and I'll be honest with you, it's probably one of the most fun conversations that I've had in quite some time. A lot of laughter, a lot of really, really great insights when it comes to, as a leader, how do you stay really sharp and focus on what truly matters? What are some steps you can take to ensure that you're focused on specifically the things that you need to be focused on? Greg refers to that as keep your eye on the knife. In other words, if you're juggling a lot of different things, the knife is the thing that can harm you. Keep your eye on the knife. He's got an incredible story that he's going to share about why we should be keeping our eye on the knife. You're going to love this episode, folks. I can't wait to share it with you, and you're going to get the whole thing right after this quick break. Hello, leaders. This is Darrin Peppard, host of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Are you ready to take your leadership and your team to the next level? As a leadership coach and speaker, I'm passionate about helping school leaders and leadership teams like yours gain clarity and walk confidently in your purpose. In today's fast-paced educational environment, it's easy to get lost in the noise. My mission is to help you cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters, building positive culture, leading with intention, and making decisions that align with your core values. Whether you're looking for a keynote address, a hands-on workshop, or a transformative leadership retreat, I tailor every experience to meet the unique needs of your team. I believe that when leaders are clear about their purpose, they can lead more authentically and create a ripple effect that impacts every level of the organization. If you're ready to inspire your team, foster deeper connections, and drive meaningful change, I'd love to work with you. Let's make your next event more than just another meeting. Let's make it a turning point for your leadership journey. Visit roadtoawesome.net or reach out directly to book me today. Together, we can lead with clarity and with purpose. You know, there are those times in leadership when so many things come at us that we feel like we're juggling knives and that we just cannot seem to get ahead, or we can't figure out, where do I place my focus today? Now, if you listen to the show or you watch the show on a regular basis, you know I talk about the firefighter versus leader piece all the time. Today, we're going to take that a little bit different level. And I'm really super excited about this because I've got Greg Bennick joining me on the show today. Greg is the author of a new book, Reclaim the Moment, 7 Strategies to Build a Better Now, best-selling book. Reclaim the Moment, 7 Strategies to Build a Better Now by Greg Bennick. Greg, thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning into Leadership podcast.
You know, you're the first person in a podcast setting to say the word best-selling, bestseller, and hearing it gave me this feeling in my chest like, wow, that's real. That's so cool. Yes, it's true. We just found out, and it's amazing. And you're the first. So thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to talk about the book. But more importantly, we're going to get into some of the strategies, and we're going to just kind of talk about this from a certain level. I'm not sure exactly if we're going to be 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 feet up off of the work, but we'll see where that takes us today. But I'm definitely excited to have you share some strategies that leaders can use, things that they can actually go and do right now to get themselves refocused, you know, and take care of the now and the long term. So, but before we do that though, Greg, let's do this. Let's maybe give our listening audience a little sampling of who Greg Bennick is, so that we've kind of, I guess, oriented ourselves on the map for today's conversation.
Absolutely. So I am a keynote speaker and writer from Seattle. I'm a researcher of the human condition, as it were. I like to say that I'm a social theorist, and that I take a look at why humans behave the way they do, and why is it that we participate in the things we participate in. And for example, the book is about focus, right? So why is it that we allow ourselves to get so unfocused? Those are the types of things I'm looking at always. And I've been traveling around the world talking to and listening to people forever, it seems, the decades certainly, about these ideas. But I started out my career as a performer, as a street performer and entertainer, and then quickly realized at age 15, when doing events for really powerful corporate clients at 15 years old, that messaging matters most. And when you're communicating messages that matter and ideas that are important to people, that they're going to connect their life with the idea, their work with the idea. So that's where all of this came together. And being a keynote speaker and presenter for associations and corporate clients and all sorts of different audiences, all is rooted in the idea of entertaining people, sure, but having important messages that matter, that relate to ideas around focus and leadership and preventing burnout and enhancing teams. So that's who I am.
Yeah, I love that. And, I want to go at the keynote speaking piece for just a second.
Sure.
As I think you know, and certainly my audience knows, it's the work that I do as well. Certainly do, speaking, the leadership coaching as well. And frequently, I'm sure this happens to you, when people learn that you are in the speaking space, they want to jump in and say, oh, I'd love to do that too.
Yeah.
And without saying, oh, hey, let's teach you how to do all of this and that type of thing. You just said two things that I think are really important. Working with an audience, when you're there, entertainment, but also an important message, a powerful message, make them do something, right? And I've always felt like a great keynote, just like a great book, if it will make people think, if it will touch their heart in some way, and it will make them do something, that's a powerful combination. What is your formula? How do you, or what do you look for when you're putting yours together? You also mentioned, but before we hit record, you do some coaching for TEDx Perth. Yeah. So talk a little bit about kind of that formula for what makes a great keynote.
Well, here's a perfect example. We'll mention TEDx Perth for your listeners who didn't hear us chatting beforehand, but I'm a speaking coach for TEDx Perth, Australia. And TEDx Perth is quite big. I mean, it's the second largest TEDx event in the Southern Hemisphere. It was at one point. It might be maybe number 3 now. I'm not sure. But the point is, I am sent people who have incredible life stories and who are going to be speaking at TEDx Perth. And then the question becomes, how do we get them from, I climbed all these mountains, I've done this incredibly innovative interview work with people, I am doing the foremost research on ocean mining and preventing the oceans from being overmined. How do we get those things into a 17-minute soundbite, essentially, so that people walk away with exactly what you're saying, a visceral feeling and response of, wow, I feel this experience, with the intellectual response of, there's content here that I can work with. And it's a function of something in the speaking world where people say, never make a point without a story and never tell a story without a point. I think that people respond to stories. So what's really important to do when crafting a keynote speech, a TEDx speech, or any such thing, is to connect a point with a story. So for example, if I just said, I want to connect a point with a story, as a response to your question, that's way different than painting the picture of, here's 3 different people and I'm coaching them, try to extract we start to envision these people, their desire to tell a story. And you see what I'm getting at. Telling a story draws people in. So when I'm constructing a keynote speech, one of the things I'm doing is thinking, what are the stories that I can tell that are compelling, relevant to my audience, and engaging for the audience as well? Because when they're laughing, when they're clapping, when they're responding, they're going to be physically engaged with the story as well as auditorily engaged. So I'm always thinking about what stories will serve the point I'm trying to make, and then make them personal, make them relevant, make them connected. And like I said, I learned this early on. I mean, I had a performance early on. I talk about it in the book, and I'm happy to share the story in an abridged version here. But I was 15 years old. I'm walking around an event for the Remington Corporation in Connecticut, and I was juggling. I used to be and started out as a juggler, and I'm walking around juggling 3 juggling balls. At the time, Remington was owned by a guy named Victor Kiam. Victor Kiam later went on to own the New England Patriots. And when I was doing this performance at 15 years old, he was one of the most powerful businessmen in the Northeast, certainly, and maybe in the country. And he had these TV commercials where he would hold up a razor And he would say, Remington, I like the razor so much, I bought the company. And everyone knew that line. So here I am.
I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Here I am, 15 years old. I'm
Yeah.
walking around this party. I'm juggling. There's all these Remington employees. And all of a sudden in walks Victor Kiam with like a sea of bodyguards and handlers. It's a summer day. They're all in suits. It looks like the Secret Service has just walked in. Victor Kiam walks up to me and he says, hey, juggler, let me see those juggling balls. I hand him the 3 juggling balls. He does this rudimentary juggle with them. All of his handlers give him the golf clap. They just love it. Hooray, Victor Kiam, we love you. And then he hands them back to me. I have the 3 juggling balls in one hand. He says, hey, those are pretty nice juggling balls. I hold them up to my face and I said, thank you, Victor Kiam. I like these juggling balls so much, I bought the company. Okay. There was a moment where no one laughed. And then Victor Kiam laughed, and then everyone laughed. Okay. In that moment, I said to myself, connect the messaging with customization for your audience. Every time you're in front of an audience, make sure that what you're saying is relatable to them, gets a visceral response from them, and is meaningful for them. That Victor Kiam example is a perfect example. If I had just done a trick, he wouldn't have cared. But when I connected it to his company and his legacy, all of a sudden, bam, it was like so powerful for him. And for me too, it changed my life.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's an outstanding example. And you took me back through, honestly, when I was writing the first edition of my first book and thinking that I needed this perfect formula for leadership, and I needed this, and I needed this, and I needed this, and a friend of mine in the speaking space, and I were having a beverage one evening, and I told him I was just stuck on my book, and he said, "Just tell your stories.
That's it.
Just tell your stories, and the rest will come, and you'll connect those stories exactly what you said. Connect those stories to the point that you're trying to make."
Yep.
And then the flow just happened. It was amazing. And that's just so good. I appreciate you allowing me to kind of bird walk our conversation over there for a couple of minutes, because
of course, absolutely. Victor Kiam's great.
That is, well, I did not expect that we would be talking about Victor Kiam on today's podcast, but we did. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So a little history lesson for you, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, exactly. And your lesson with your friend is exactly right. When people have come to me for speaking coaching, whether through TEDx Birth or individually, I always tell them the same thing. I said, you have been asked to speak, not because you're a fool, not because you don't know what to say, and not because you are being asked to be embarrassed. You've been asked to speak because you know what you're doing, and the audience is excited to hear from you, and they are waiting to enjoy you. So position yourself in front of them and just tell them what you know. Just tell them what you know. And we then construct a speech or develop based on that. But that overcoming speaking fear, which of course is, such an immense fear for people, is oftentimes rooted to the fact that they forget that they know more than they think they do. And when they start to share that more, people relate, especially if it's in story form, especially if it's customized, and especially if it's relatable and visceral for the audience. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so good. So let's do some more storytelling then, and let's tell the story of this book. I'm enamored with the concept of this book, with reclaiming the moment, with some strategies to build a better now. When you and I had our first conversation and we started talking through a few of these, I'm looking back at my notes and I just was furiously writing things down, even though you told me, hey, I'm going to email this all to you. I still was just furiously writing it down because I was so intrigued by things like keep your eye on the knife, leap into the dark, start a reverberation effect. So many great things. And I think, as somebody who has been in numerous leadership roles, I know that it's easy to fall down. It's easy to get overwhelmed, and it's easy to not have the focus that we want. And you said something right off the top about how you study the human condition and some of those things. I don't remember your exact words, but essentially we allow ourselves to get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
and absolutely. You had some curiosity behind that. So let's maybe start there with why. And I'm not going to say why do we. I'm going to say why do I So here's your chance. Figure me out here, Greg. Why do I allow myself to do that?
It's alluring, and you want it. You want to be distracted. You want the allure. You want the allure of the next shiny big thing. I study the work of a couple of different folks, but a cultural anthropologist named Ernest Becker, who was deeply inspired by a guy named Otto Rank. And Otto Rank he's writing around 1910, 1920. Well, it came early on in his career. He wrote to a friend and he said that the world suffers from an overabundance of truth and that he had given up writing for the time being. Now, this is in the early part of the 1900s. What overabundance of truth was he talking about? Books. There were too many books distracting him, and he couldn't possibly continue writing because of all the distractions. What would this guy think of TikTok? What would he think of Instagram Reels? What would he think? You get the point, right? So we desire the distraction. Like, quite honestly, right now, if there's a knock on each of our doors and our favorite pizza with its favorite topping shows up at the door, freshly baked, I got to say, I might just kind of start slowly sneaking off this way and then engage with the pizza guy for a minute. We want the distractions, not because talking to you isn't great, but the next big thing is social conditioning, where we begin to think that there's always something better right around the corner. If we talk to a relationship expert, I bet we'd find that's why relationships are breaking up. It's the next big thing that always has us scrolling to the next big thing, expecting the next big thing. And this is one reason why we get distracted, because we want it. We want the next big thing. So, the keep your eyes on the knife chapter, it is a juggling metaphor, but it's rooted in a story. I was 13 years old. I was doing my first professional performance in a very small town where I grew up in Connecticut. And I'm in front of this audience, all gathered around a basketball court where I was performing. So everyone in town, and we're talking about a town with more cows than people, everyone knew the Bennick boy was going to do this juggling show. And I had this idea. I was going to take, and I don't have a knife around here. I mean, who would? But I was going to take a carrot and take a knife and chop the carrot and say, ladies and gentlemen, these knives that I'm about to juggle are sharp. Now, where does a 13-year-old get a knife? I'd raided my mom's kitchen, as we all do. Anyway, so I got this knife in the kitchen. I have this carrot. I was going to slice the carrot once. These knives are sharp. Well, I'm in front of the audience. I'm swept up in the moment. There's people looking at me. My ego is going through the roof. People are clapping. They're excited. My popularity at school is about to increase astronomically. I take the knife, and instead of saying, ladies and gentlemen, these knives are sharp, I start hitting the carrot with the knife on every word. These knives are sharp. And as I'm slicing through the carrot, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And on sharp, I slice the knife directly through my finger, holding what's left of the carrot. Okay, so now I'm bleeding, and now I'm trying to hold on to my finger to keep it from bleeding. I'm in front of the entire audience, and I'm trying to juggle. And as you can imagine, there's blood flying all over the place, to the point where whenever I've gone back to my small Connecticut town, even after literally half a lifetime, people, instead of saying, you know what, I remember when you started, you were so entertaining to watch, they say, dude, do you remember that time you had the blood flying all over? Okay. So they still remember the injury.
As if you could forget, right?
As if I could forget. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Woodbury, Connecticut. The point is, keep your eyes on the knife became a juggling metaphor. When we've got all the distractions around us, the people clapping for us, take that as liking our posts, the people giving us attention, all the different things that we can imagine would distract us. Are we keeping our eyes on the thing that's most important? Because what I didn't do is keep my eye on the thing that was most important. The most mission critical task was making sure that this knife went through this carrot and not my hand, right? But instead, I was like, oh, you know what's important is that the cute girl from history class is clapping for me. And oh, wow, there's the garbage man. You know what I'm saying? Like, totally distracted by the inconsequentials. This is what we do all the time. Rather than focus on the most mission critical task ahead of us, you wanted concrete messages for leaders. We allow ourselves to get distracted by the minutia and distracted by perceived major things that are not the knife. So keeping our eyes on the knife is about really getting focused on what is the most mission critical task in this moment that requires our engagement, because that's going to allow the other ones to get accomplished the way that we want them to get accomplished. And when leaders remember that, teams feel inspired by that focus too. So there you go. Another story-driven lesson here on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, it is, and it makes me think. Certainly, I don't have a knife through my hand story, and I'm not looking for one to come my way anytime soon. But it certainly does make me think. As I talked about a little bit when I kicked it off, there have been those times, and I see it with leaders that I work with all the time, that so many things become, whether that's the
Yep.
shiny new distraction, or often I think leaders will allow other people's mission critical item to become their mission critical item. So then instead of one, I have 6 or 7 or 11 different things I'm trying to do at once. And I'm not a juggler, but I can imagine that juggling 6 things is more complicated than juggling 3, and juggling 11 things is certainly conditionally more difficult than juggling 2 or 3 things.
Yep.
So, what are some things that help? I mean, certainly saying keep our eyes on the knife is important. What are some other pieces that you feel? I mean, we could go through all 7. We're not going to spend the time on all 7,
Sure,
but
sure.
what's maybe 1 or 2 more pieces of advice from this awesome book that that you have that might help leaders who are now saying, after listening to your knife story, they're saying, okay, Greg, I get it. You're right. I allow myself to get focused on a lot of other things. Okay. I told you it was your turn to analyze me. You nailed it. So, okay, I need to keep my eye on the knife. But now what? I
Yeah.
still got to get it all done.
No, you're great. And I'm going to actually give another example of the keeping the eye on the knife, and then I'll dive into your answer. You are excellent as a podcaster. One of the things that your listeners don't know is that you send out a questionnaire in advance. Tell me about yourself. Let's cover some basic points, to which me, the interviewee, is supposed to reply. Okay. As it geared up time to go on to this podcast episode, dear listeners, I had not yet filled out that information. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm about to walk into this thing and I haven't given the host the information he needs to do an excellent interview. I'm trying to answer everything. I'm dealing over here with the book launch. Dealing over here with the book launch, phone rings. And I'm like, how am I going to possibly get this document together so that we can do this interview? And as the time drew near, I thought to myself, the knife is the interview. We're going to have an awesome conversation, whether I send in that document or not. We're going to have an awesome, and we are. And what I did was I put that off to the side, the book launch off to the side. Focus on the call. Focus on this. This is the mission critical thing. This is the thing that allows for the most connection, the most development, the most growth. We'll deal with the paperwork later. You see what I'm getting at? And we do this all the time. It's the Office Space TPS reports, right? And I'm not saying, disregard your responsibilities and your TPS reports, but, maybe in order to get done the thing that really needs to get done. So to answer your question, some other points from the book, which I think are salient and definitely apply here. One is to leap into the dark. One thing that I think that leaders often do is I don't want to say rest on their laurels, but they remain in yesterday in terms of what worked yesterday, what worked the day before, rather than thinking what might work now. And the chapter on leap into the dark and embracing the possibility of success is the idea that sometimes we can step into the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen, and find incredible results as a result of that process. And the people with whom we work will appreciate that as well. People want vibrancy. They want to feel that edgy sense of like, let's try this. Innovation has driven so much in human history because of people leaping into the dark. And by leaping into the dark, I don't mean like you close your eyes and jump into a pit of vipers and knives and, turmoil, but rather imagine a tunnel. Sometimes you see a light at the other end of the tunnel. Other times, as you walk into the tunnel, maybe you don't see a light at the other end, and you put foot by foot forward until you find something that you're looking for. Now, it doesn't have to be a something situation with leadership, but I think that thinking in terms of slightly more risk-taking, in terms of our adventurous spirit and leaping into the dark and bringing our team with us to try something new, try new approaches to new ideas, to a new concept, to new product development, whatever it might be, can have amazing results. It's something to consider. Another one is I talk in the book about developing relationships that matter. And this gets a little more psychological, but it's really important. And I can say it very simply, which is that when we are in relationship, we learn who we are. I am more Greg than I was 20 minutes ago because of this conversation. And leaders need to remember that when they inspire actual teamwork, like not just people around one another working in the same capacity, but really inspire people to connect with one another and learn from one another and really engage with one another, people start to feel and know more about who they are as individuals. That creates people who can be part of a vibrant team when people are more grounded within themselves without team building exercises. I'm talking about real connection. When you develop relationships that matter, it outsmarts this dread that, wow, maybe I'm just by myself on this team. Maybe, no, we start to learn who we are and what our role is on the team. And we start to engage with others from that perspective. It makes for stronger teams. That makes leadership more viable. So I'd say that those are two ideas from the book, but the book is filled with ideas that relate to teamwork and preventing burnout and enhancing leadership and connection. All of those things are in there too.
And all of that is just absolutely stellar pieces. As I was listening to you talk about leaping into the dark, it took me back to a conversation I actually had earlier today with someone. And we were actually talking about it, my business partner and wife. She and I were having a conversation about where our business is now and where we see it going down the road, and how there are some pieces that we'd like to see evolve. And we talked about how, sometimes you've got to be willing to take that leap, take that risk, and you don't do it after you've reached the top. It's when you're getting to the top or when you're at the top, right? And that conversation and what you were just sharing made me think about the greatest golfer of all time, Tiger Woods. At the pinnacle of the early part of his career, he won every time he went out there practically. And then he fired his swing coach. He brought in a new swing coach. He completely changed his swing. And everybody said, "What are you doing?" But it wasn't about Tiger Woods now. It was about Tiger Woods for the next 10 to 15 years. He knew he was going to remodel his body. He knew he was going to need to do this in order to innovate as a golfer. And that, when you're talking about leaping into the dark, that's what that makes me think about. Somebody who at the absolute top of his game says, I'm going to tear it all down and I'm going to start over again because of where I know I can potentially go, right?
Amazing.
How powerful is that? So, I mean, leaders, you've got to be willing to take that step. And I'm not saying you need to tear down your swing, fire your swing coach. Tiger did stuff at a level none of us will ever do. But it's an incredible example. So it's an incredible example. I love it so much, and I'm going to throw it back to you because it looks like you can't wait to react to what I'm sharing. So I want to hear you talk a little bit more about leap into the dark after that.
Well, I'm just amazed at how much you and I are kindred spirits and thinking along the same lines. One of the things I'm doing in support of the book, I have a website where I'm uploading videos of supportive content that goes above and beyond the book. And one of the videos that I was going to record was about Neil Peart, the drummer of the band Rush, the Canadian rock trio Rush, now deceased, very unfortunately, but I'm a huge fan of the band. And one thing that Neil Peart did is at the height of their career, he changed his drumstick grip. Like he was playing with his hands like this, and he changed to a more traditional grip where you've got one hand facing up, one facing down. And he worked with a drumming coach. And I was going to talk about the fact that he changed his grip, his drumming grip, in order to improve his future drumming. He worked with a coach and had to relearn drumming, basically. This idea also is evident, and I'm going to talk about this in the video. I love the fact you brought this up. There's a classical guitarist named Philip DeFremery, who's a dear friend and extraordinary at classical guitar, who also changed his guitar grip at the height of his career and started relearning his guitar technique. So the point is that the evidence of this is out there for people to leap into the dark and try new things. These are brilliant examples, and I think that we can all be doing that too. And it doesn't have to be that we're famous drummers, that we are famous golfers or famous guitarists. It could simply be a process-driven initiative where we think to ourselves, I'm going to try this thing differently now. I'm just going to try this thing differently now. Every single week, you and I get together, we file these reports at this time and do this. What if we did it differently? Every year we have our company breakout session in Tuscaloosa. Next year, we're going to try something different. We're going to do it virtual, or we've done it virtual for a few years. We're going to try to have our annual meeting in person in Las Vegas, whatever it might be. Let's mix it up. Let's leap into the dark and see where we end up, because chances are, if we're dealing with competent people who understand how to reclaim the moment, not to be trite, but realistically, and how to build a better now, we're going to have a team of people who support us as we leap into the dark, because they're just going to be on board with that process. I think it's got all the potential in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, that's leadership innovation right there. I just love that so much. Oh my gosh, what an incredible conversation. And man, Greg, we could just keep going and going and going. However, we are at that point in the show where I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody who comes on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Man, you've shared so much, but maybe give us something else that you're doing right now to lean into leadership.
I'm believing in the possibility of kindness. Kindness is the first chapter of my book, and it sounds like a soft skill, but it has real world implications. We live in an increasingly complex world, and in that increasingly complex world, we react to it and oftentimes end up feeling weighted down by it. When we believe in the possibility of kindness, meaning when we believe that the intentions of people around us are actually good or benevolent, or that they will be progressive towards an end that is mutually desirable, all of a sudden it opens up possibilities. So I believe in the possibility of kindness. Rather than me sitting here thinking to myself, this guy has me filling out this preliminary questionnaire. Why is he doing this? He wants to bog down my morning. I think to myself, you know what? He's trying to get to know me, to have a great conversation. He wants this to go really well. That believing in the possibility of kindness is going to be transformative for people. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And as leaders, we have to be thinking that way.
Yes, we do. 100%. Man, such good stuff today, Greg. People are going to want to get in touch with you. They're going to want to follow you. Good. They're going to want to get connected with you. What's the best way for them to find you?
Well, they can find me, of course, on LinkedIn and all the socials. For example, Instagram is at Greg Bennick, GregBennick. And if you search my name or Build a Better Now on LinkedIn, you're going to find me there. But of course, GregBennick.com is sort of the repository of all the Greg Bennick info, GregBennick.com. And that's a great way to find out about what I've got going on. I've got a blog on there, but I'd love to be in touch with folks anytime. So if you've read the book, interested in it, if you're interested in the ideas, be in touch. Let's have conversations. I would absolutely love that. And thank you for your time today. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. Best of luck in the future. Best of continued luck and success with the book.
Thank you very much.
Man, how much fun was that? I sure appreciate Greg Bennick coming on the show and sharing some of his incredible insights. Make sure, folks, you get down there in the show notes, hit those links that are there. Go get yourself a copy of Greg's new book. It is fantastic. He's a wonderful guy. Make sure you get connected with him and continue to lean into what Greg Bennick has to offer. And now it's time for a pep talk. So this week on the Pep Talk, I want to talk about something that I was reading about recently. I love to bounce into groups on Facebook that are specific for principals for a number of reasons. And one of them is honestly just what I can find for content. And this is a great example. I found 3 different posts by people who were concerned about their drop-off lanes and some of the challenges that they're faced with parents either picking kids up early to try and avoid the drop-off lane or simply just the chaos of the drop-off lane. And it took me back to a blog post that I wrote a couple of years ago titled Life in the Drop-Off Lane. And I'll actually link that in the show notes for you. But I wanted to just give a few pieces of quick advice about how we handle the drop-off lane as the building principal. I'm just going to give you 3. All right. Number 1, folks, make sure that you over-communicate. Yeah, that's right. Over-communicate. The more information you share with parents, with kids, with bus drivers, and with your staff, the more they're going to actually know what's happening. We have this tendency as leaders, and I think this is more as human beings, to communicate something once and assume that everybody got it. We all know that's not going to work, right? You need to over-communicate. Share repeatedly. What are your expectations? What does the process look like? What are the protocols that you have specifically set up for your drop-off and pickup lane? The more that you do that communication, the more likely it is that people will start to pick up on it. And number 2, direct traffic. I know this seems like a no-brainer, but literally you need to be out in the mix helping to direct traffic. You've seen police officers do it. Just make like you're one of those individuals and start directing the traffic. You need to teach your staff, you need to teach your parents, and you need to teach your students exactly what it is that you expect them to do. If you leave it to them, they will create chaos. And it's not because they'll do it on purpose. It's because they don't know better. You need to teach them. So really get out there and direct traffic. And then 3, exercise a little grace, exercise a little kindness. All right. Nobody's trying to be angry. Nobody's trying to be obnoxious in the drop-off lane, right? Again, they just don't know. Really lean in this time of year. You've got to do as much as you can to train them, to teach them, and to reinforce the things that you want to see. Treat it like it's PBIS, right? Recognize, reward, and reinforce the behaviors that you want to see. Exact same thing is going to hold true in your drop-off lane, folks. You've got this. You can keep it under control. You're the leader. Make sure that you're setting that positive example. That's what I've got for you this week, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to Leading Into Leadership. Have a road to awesome week.